Hey everybody, once again, sorry about the noisy fan in the background. Here we are in the IS-7, we're on Himmelsdorf. Now Himmelsdorf used to be one of the most loved maps in the game because it was one of the few maps that Wargaming managed to not fuck up. It offered a fair amount of options on what to do. It was pretty solid. Arty could basically do very little on this map, which made it very popular back in the days when Arty was still a very, very serious problem. Unfortunately, the proliferation of Tier 10 tank destroyers combined with the constant power creep in this game has made Himmelsdorf a complete shitfest, because typically you end up with very high-pen guns and or very heavily armoured shit bricks camping at the end of each major street. And so the linear nature of the map where you're basically charging down open lanes, not so good anymore. Even trying to side scrape on corners and stuff, either it turns into a static fight over the middle of a street or it turns into charging into something you didn't see around a corner and dying horribly. So not a fan of this map anymore. I'm in my IS-7, so although I'm not really fast uphill, I know I'm fast downhill, and my armor will be very useful on the hill. Although nominally the Mouse and E100 may actually have better armor, the IS-7 has the best armor scheme in the game, at least until the Object 260 starts popping up, because that thing is fucking absurd. It's just better than this and the IS-4 in every single respect. Now, one of the fun quirks about the IS-7, if I look from the front, is not only is it very thick armor sloped at very, very steep angles, but this whole corner here, this triangle I'm moving the cursor over, is spaced. So if you hit anything left of the weld seam there, sorry about the camera being facing the wrong way when I shot there, but if you hit anything left of that weld seam, it's spaced armor, you won't do any damage. The IS-7 has excellent all-round armor protection. It's relatively low height, and its ridiculously good angles and curves make it a nightmare to fight. And because of the turret as well, there's virtually no weak spots on the turret, except at very close range with high-pen heat rounds or APCR from Tier 10 tank destroyers. There's no cupolas. The hatches don't stand out enough from the turret to pen them. If an IS-7 face hugs you, you're basically fucked. Anyway, somehow this T-44 has found a way to pen me, and my shot skipped off his front plate because I didn't aim it very well. He's probably shooting me diagonally through the idler wheel at the front with gold. He could pen through there. It's one of the few places in IS-7's actually vulnerable. So it was surprising to get penned by him, but because it's only a T-44, he wasn't really doing much damage to me, and so once he was dealt with, no problems. I decided to cut down this road to avoid getting blocked by the Foch. I come around, take the corner too wide, and unfortunately missed the jump there. I was going to try and pop out on top of that, well, not on top of, but right next to the T-69 and finish him. Didn't work. Probably a good thing, because it saved me having to run around the streets in the K-line trying to get onto Heavy Alley. As you can see, the enemy have basically pushed our team back into the top right corner of the map, and we only have a couple tanks led by me to try and rescue them, plus the 121 on hill. I don't know what he thinks he's doing, because the 121 doesn't have gun depression. But anyway, things look pretty dire. However, doesn't necessarily mean we've lost, as Marius and some of the tank destroyers are able to constantly reset the guys on cap, while the rest of us push up and close in on the now split up enemy force. T-34 backs out, stupid move, and the E100 is simply surrounded. I decide, rather than going to jump in on him when there's enough tanks there already, I will cut up this street and get in on the cap as quickly as possible. T-49's not paying attention. I finish him off, probably save someone about 1,000 hit points, and then our Foch deals with the IS-7 while the Type 61 finishes the 100. Myself and Marius nearly crash because, we drive on different sides of the road, and so we both swerve into each other, basically. And our cap is now safe. In fact, the enemy only have a couple of tanks left. Now, they do have a Waffenträger E100, which is still a big threat to us, even at this point it could quite easily even out the numbers and possibly win the game. It was last up here, so I was a little careful at first, a little reluctant to drive out onto the street, but it appears to have moved. In fact, it looks like it's RTB. IS-8's also running away. The enemy arty is badly out of position in A1. He obviously made the poor decision to run up the tracks when they thought they had that flank secure, and it's come back to bite him because now he's overcommitted. He can't run away without getting shot anyway. Cut the corner a little there, and driving skills not so good. Here, rather than running down the street and risking getting hit from there, I decided to just cut straight through the plaza. The waffle's been lit. I know where he is. He's not a threat to me at the moment. Nothing to worry about. I was looking at maybe getting the flank on the IS-8. Now, I could have reared up over that rubble pile and hit him, but it would have exposed my left side very badly, and the ISU probably would have got a shot in. Instead, I waited for the shot at the side of his turret, and now I'm making a move on the ISU, who is a threat to me at close range, assuming he actually aims his shots, but not enough of a threat to scare me away, particularly because I still have quite a lot of hit points left. But I have an easier shot at the T-30, so I take that instead. The ISU, being turretless and having very poor gun depression, is too afraid to push over the rubble pile and deal with me, and so I'm able to take out the T-30 in comfort without worrying about the ISU, who then gets flanked by Marius. I scoot around his back, and although he starts turning to engage me, he just doesn't have the time, and right as he was about to shoot, I snap off a shot. The Waffle tries here. Bless him, he tries. But the IS-7's frontal armor is just nightmarish to deal with. It's probably the tank I'm most afraid of facing frontally, with the IS-4 being maybe a close second. The German heavy tanks are not really difficult to fight frontally, you just have to avoid getting hit by their guns. So, pretty cruisy game. It did look a bit ropey for a while there, but we came out on top. One thing I'd actually like to talk about is my average damage in the IS-7 is really quite piss poor. It's lower than the IS-7's hit points at the moment, which is, you know, bad. And I also tend to switch a lot between regular AP and gold APCR. Now, there's a reason for this. The IS-7 has really, really bad gun handling, like atrociously bad gun handling. It also has a pretty poor reload time. It does have a decent enough gun. It does 490 alpha, same as the E75's 128. 250 pen on the AP is not too bad. Like 250 is about average for a tier 10, and it will go through most things in the game without trouble. The problem is the bad gun handling, because 250 pen on, say, a Conqueror or on a Batchat is fine, but when you start looking at actually, I think the Bat might be more than 250. On the 121 instead, I will say the 121. So 250 pen on the 121 or a Wheezy 120 or whatever is fine, because, in those, their mediums, bad gun handling is somewhat compensated for by getting up close and personal, and actually I think their gun handling, by the numbers, may not be that much better than the IS-7's, but just by feel, it doesn't feel quite as bad. Again, it may be a function of being medium tanks and much more comfortable to drive. But the terrible gun handling makes 250 not that viable. Even at close range, quite often, if something angles even the slightest bit, you'll bounce off of it because your shot will find the one place it could possibly bounce. So I do tend to shoot quite a bit of gold out of the IS-7. This is the other problem. The IS-7 doesn't have a decent gold round. You gain 53 millimeters of penetration for 303. 303 pen on a gold round at tier 10 is just shockingly bad. Most of them are around 330, 340. Back in the olden days, before it was nerfed into the ground, the M62 and the Chinese version of it on the Wheezy 120 used to have 400 millimeters of pen on heat, and of course most tier 10 tank destroyers have about 270 or 280 pen on their regular rounds, and then about 400 or 350 to 400 on their gold round. So it's not really good pen. Even a lot of tier 8, 9 tanks have gold pen that is comparable or better. I probably just shot myself in the foot, because I bet that most tier 8s don't have better gold, but for tier, it's, you know, they have better. At 303 pen at tier 10, and it's APCR, so it doesn't normalize as well. It's really not quite enough. So, I mean, this tank's not really bad. It's not underpowered, it's just not meta. And not meta is, you know, mostly a Clan Wars thing now, but the IS-7 is an alright tank. It's fast in a straight line if it gets a run-up, but its terrible ground resistances means it can't go anywhere in a hurry on flat ground or uphill or on bad terrain. And this is a problem with the IS-7. If they gave it mobility more in line with what it probably should have, you know, given its historical capabilities, and then the way that those historical capabilities are abstracted, because I don't think anyone sane will honestly believe a tank can do 50 k's an hour off-road. You know, it would be much faster and more mobile. It would be almost a medium tank, a fat medium. It would be pretty unfair, even with the bad gun handling. So, you know, in exchange for having such a good armor scheme, it pays for it in mobility, even though it has good mobility on paper. In practice, it's quite poor, and it has atrociously bad gun handling. So the IS-7 is mostly a one-trick pony. You have to get up close to people because, again, no real frontal weak spots, particularly not on the turret, where people will be able to hit you if you're face-hugging them. So if you get up in someone's face, your pen isn't going to be as much of a problem. You don't have weak spots they can hit, at least not really. And your mobility, you know, isn't that bad, because if you're up in their face, they can't really do anything about it unless they're a medium tank. So the IS-7 has basically one thing it does well, and everything else is kind of mediocre at. Mostly it sort of wanders around the map soaking shots while waiting for a chance to actually get close enough to use its gun on something. And as such, a lot of people complain about it. I complain about it fairly regularly. You know, some goons say, oh, the IS-7's a shit tank, it needs a buff. I don't know if I'd say it needs a buff as such. I think maybe the only thing I'd change on this tank is just giving it a slightly better gold round, and maybe improving the gun a little bit, because, as I said, the 260 is everything this and the IS-4 do, and better. And so, since Wargaming seem happy to embrace the power creep rather than actually do anything about it, maybe giving the IS-7 a little bit of love wouldn't be a bad idea. But for the most part, it's still a solid tank. It's very good for playing pubs in, because it's just so survivable. Really the only major threat to this, other than tier 10 tank destroyers, is artillery or very aggressive medium drivers who are either stupid or brave enough to get up right close to you and start hitting you at short range. But again, that spaced side armor and very thick, well-sloped rear armor does pay off a lot. And the turret is so well-sloped that most shots into the side of it won't even pen it. So if you're looking for a mobile bunker, don't go down the German tree. The German heavies are more about hit points than armor, although they do nominally have armor. In practice, it's shit because it's flat and it's in easy to hit places, and they are huge. If you want to be a mobile bunker, this is the way to go. You want either the IS-4 or the IS-7. I'd personally say the IS-7 is the better choice out of the two, because it's a little more flexible, has a bit more mobility over the IS-4. And although the gun isn't nearly as good, the IS-4's gun is far and away superior. It's one of the best heavy tank guns in the game. The IS-7 is just better protected all round, while the IS-4 has very good armor. If somebody gets beside it or behind it, it's pretty much fucked. Whereas this thing, you know, you get all sorts of bullshit bounces off of it. So that's pretty much a rundown of the IS-7. I have done videos of it before, and I think I've basically come up with the same points, that I think its gun needs some looking at. And it's very frustrating to use at anything other than point-blank range, but it's still a fun tank to have. It's not as relevant as it used to be. I mean, our Clan Wars teams back in the early days of NDP used to be basically 1/3 IS-7s, maybe a couple E100s, and the rest in T30s. And that was, you know, pretty standard. I think we were one of the heavier users of IS-7s in Clan Wars, but other clans did definitely bring them. And they were very useful, because back then they were the most mobile of the tier 10 heavies, and they were, you know, actually quite mobile, because this is before physics were added, and all of the tanks stuck to the ground like glue. Physics actually hurt quite a number of tanks, I think I mentioned this before, the T-34, the Soviet T-34, lost a lot of mobility because of physics. The T-50-2, while gaining a lot of entertainment value out of physics, because you can ramp it off things now, that tank used to... It's difficult to describe. The T-50-2 used to whiz around like a fucking gnat on crack. It was extremely difficult to hit with anything, much less, arty or a heavy tank that was, had slow turret traverse and shitty gun handling. And now the 50-2 hits a small bump and it's fucked. Wargaming have started to look at that now. They're smoothing out some of the maps, but it's still an issue. And I think the IS-7 did lose out a little bit from physics, but not nearly as bad as the mediums and lights did. And I think probably Wargaming fucked with its ground resistance at some point, because I do seem to remember the IS-7 being marginally more mobile than it is now, but, I might just be looking at it with rose-coloured glasses. Anyway, I've spoken for long enough, so thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. I wish you the best of luck in the field, and I'll catch you on the next one.